$3 is more than you deserve, her brother-in-law said, sliding the deed across her husband's coffin. By sunset, 23-year-old widow Nora Bellamy stood before a fire-blackened manor the family had abandoned for 40 years. Every hearth was packed with brick, every window was broken, yet smoke curled from the tallest sealed chimney. When Nora pressed her palm against the parlor wall, it was warm, and 3 deliberate knocks answered from inside the masonry. Nora did not scream. She pressed her ear against the plaster and waited. Her father had spent 30 years building church walls, bridge supports, and factory furnaces across Ohio. From him she had learned that stone settled with dull cracks, pipes clicked as they cooled, and rats scratched without rhythm. Those 3 blows had been evenly spaced, human. She lifted the small Mason S hammer she had carried from her old home and struck the wall twice. A pause followed. Then 2 knocks returned from somewhere deep inside the bricks. Outside, the final strip of daylight vanished behind the empty fields. Nora's horse had already been led away by the driver Cyrus hired to bring her there. The nearest town was 6 miles east. She had 1 trunk, $11, her father's tools, and a deed recording the transfer of Bellamy Manor for the insulting sum of $3. Cyrus had retained the profitable farms, the family house, and every dollar belonging to his dead brother Nathan. Nora had been given the one property no creditor wanted. She raised her lantern and examined the wall more carefully. Most of the parlor had been scorched during the fire of 1837. Black stains climbed the ceiling. Rain had eaten the wallpaper into curling strips, and part of the floor sagged toward the center. Yet the mortar surrounding the sealed fireplace was strangely pale. Someone had repaired it long after the fire. Nora touched one joint with the tip of her hammer. Fine sand loosened immediately. It was less than a year old. A gust swept through the broken windows, carrying cold ash across the room. Nora turned toward the doorway. Beyond it stretched a corridor filled with fallen plaster and furniture covered in damp canvas. Nothing moved. Still, she felt watched. She returned to the fireplace and studied its construction. Whoever sealed it had laid the bricks carelessly, disguising the original opening without tying the new masonry into the older wall. The surface could be removed, but not safely in darkness. If a hidden furnace remained active behind it, one wrong strike might release flame or poisonous smoke into the room. Another knock sounded. This time it came from beneath her feet. Nora lowered the lantern. A faded carpet covered the center of the parlor. She pulled it aside and uncovered an iron grill set between the floorboards. Warm air rose through its narrow slots, carrying the smell of coal, wet clay, and something sharper she recognized from her father's furnace work. Firebrick dust, the manor had not merely been a residence. Somewhere beneath it stood a kiln or industrial furnace, large enough to heat the walls and chimney, yet neither Nathan nor his family had ever mentioned such a place. A floorboard creaked behind her. Nora spun around, hammer raised. The doorway was empty. Her lantern illuminated only drifting dust, but a wet bootprint now marked the corridor floor. Then another appeared farther away, barely visible where someone had stepped through a patch of ash. She followed the prints into what had once been a dining room. They ended beside a stone column supporting the damaged ceiling. No door stood there, and the surrounding wall showed no opening. When she tested the column with her hammer, 3 sides answered with solid stone. The 4th rang hollow. Nora crouched and discovered a round iron plate hidden behind the baseboard. Its rusted center contained several tiny holes. It resembled the speaking tubes once used between furnace levels, allowing workers to warn one another above the roar of the fire. She leaned close. "Who is down there?" Only the faint rush of moving air answered. "My name is Nora Bellamy. This property belongs to me." A metallic scrape traveled through the tube. Someone below was shifting the cover at the opposite end. Nora tightened her grip on the hammer. "Did you light that furnace?" A man's voice finally rose through the iron plate. Weak but urgent. "Put out your lantern, Mrs. Bellamy." Nora froze. She had told no one in town that she was coming, and the deed had been placed in her hands only that morning. "Who are you?" The man ignored her question. "Cyrus left someone on the northern ridge," he whispered. "He is waiting to see which chimney wakes." A gunshot shattered the last intact window behind Nora. Her lantern fell, and the parlor plunged into darkness. She dropped flat as glass struck the wall above her. A second shot punched through the rotting window frame, but no third followed. The marksman had not been aiming at her body. He wanted her frightened enough to leave. Nora crawled behind the stone column and felt along the floor until her fingers found the lantern. Its flame had died, though the oil had not spilled. Through the broken window, she saw a rider cross the pale line of the northern ridge and disappear among the pines. "Are you hurt?" the man beneath the floor asked. "No, then go to the pantry. There is an iron hatch beneath the ash bin. Tell me your name first, Solomon Pike. I worked the lower kilns when Nathan's grandfather still owned this place. If Cyrus Mann returns, that column will not stop a rifle ball." Nora moved through the dark by touching walls rather than risking another light. The pantry ceiling had collapsed at one corner, and the ash bin was buried beneath broken lath. She cleared it with her hands until she found an iron ring set into the floor. The hatch beneath it lifted only 3 inches before a chain stopped it. A hand appeared in the gap and pushed a small key toward her. She unlocked the chain. A narrow brick stair descended below the kitchen. Solomon Pike waited at the bottom, with a miner's lamp hooded beneath his coat. He was a thin man near 60, with a white scar crossing his throat and a left leg that dragged as he walked. Coal dust darkened the lines of his face. He carried no weapon, only a long iron rod used to clear furnace grates. "You lit the fire," Nora said, "a drying flame no larger than a cookstove fire. The lower chambers have to stay dry or the walls will split for 40 years? Not every day, once each month in wet seasons. Your husband paid me to begin again. Last spring." The mention of Nathan struck more sharply than the gunfire. Nathan knew about this place? He knew there was something below it. He did not live long enough to learn what. Solomon led her through a low passage built from dense cream-colored brick. Unlike the parlor walls, these courses remained straight. 7 narrow flues ran overhead, but only one carried heat. The others had been blocked with fitted stone. At the passage's end stood a circular kiln taller than a house. Its iron doors closed and its outer wall uncracked despite 4 decades of neglect. Nora touched one pale brick. Its surface was smooth as fired pottery and marked with a tiny 7-pointed star. "My father would have paid dearly for bricks like these," she said. "Many men did. Then the works burned, 3 men died, and the Bellamys told the county the clay had failed." "Did it?" Solomon lifted his lamp toward the perfect arch above them. "You tell me." The kiln had survived while the mansion above it rotted. Nora saw no sagging joints, no burst faces, no white lines from heat fracture. Whatever caused the old fire, these bricks had not caused it. Why did Cyrus give me the deed if he knew this was here? Because he believes the useful part is gone. He also believes a grieving widow will sign whatever he puts before her once the roof begins falling. Solomon showed her a stone table beside the kiln. A rectangle of dust lay at its center, sharply outlined as if a box or stack of papers had been removed recently. Fresh scrapes marked the floor. "Cyrus came down here?" she asked. "His men did. They found the old entrance from the quarry in June. I closed the inner gate before they reached the furnace room." What were they seeking? A formula, a survey, perhaps proof of who first made the star brick. Nathan believed all 3 remained somewhere in the works. Nora looked at the star beneath her thumb. Cyrus had not handed her a meaningless ruin. He had handed her a question he expected hunger and fear to keep her from asking. Solomon took her to a small chamber beside the lower stair. It held a cot, 2 blankets, a water crock, and enough coal for perhaps 6 weeks. He had been living there since Nathan's death, protecting what he could. Nora wanted to demand every fact at once. But the old man's breathing had become shallow. A dark stain spread through the cloth tied around his calf. "The rider did that?" she asked. "Yesterday he found me near the quarry gate." Nora knelt and removed the bandage. The wound was a deep graze, inflamed but not yet foul. She cleaned it with boiled water from Solomon's kettle and tore a strip from the lining of her travel cloak. Her hands were steadier when given work. Grief became most dangerous when it had nothing to do. By dawn, she had made 2 decisions. Solomon would not remain underground without food or treatment, and she would not leave Bellamy Manor. The town of Millstone met her first request with silence. At the general store, men stopped talking when she asked for lamp oil, flour, nails, window canvas, and carbolic soap. The proprietor, Ruth Delaney, was a broad-shouldered widow with iron-gray hair and a pencil tucked behind one ear. She added the prices twice before looking at Nora's coins. "You cannot afford all of this," Ruth said. "Remove the lamp oil. You need light. Then remove half the flour." Ruth studied the soot on Nora's dress and the cut across her cheek from the shattered window. "Cyrus Bellamy told people you would be back by breakfast." Cyrus was mistaken. An old farmer near the stove laughed. "That house kills everyone foolish enough to wake it." "Nora," said her father's hammer on the counter. "Houses do not load rifles." The laughter stopped. Ruth placed the soap and full sack of flour beside the nails. $9.80. You may owe the remaining $2 until Saturday. Nora did not ask why the woman had extended credit. Gratitude, like pity, could become uncomfortable when examined too quickly. She thanked Ruth and used her remaining money to hire a farm wagon. Solomon rode beneath blankets in the back while Nora sat beside the driver. At the manor, she settled him in a dry servant's room, cleaned the chimney of a small unsealed stove, and covered its broken window with canvas. For 6 days she worked from first light, until her fingers stiffened. She braced the kitchen ceiling with timber salvaged from the carriage house, patched holes in the servant's roof with tin and tarred cloth, and diverted rainwater away from the western foundation. She did not attempt to save the entire building. Her father had taught her that pride repaired nothing. First stop water, then support weight, then make one room safe enough to sleep in. Solomon recovered slowly. In exchange for food and bandages, he drew the lower works from memory. The kiln chamber lay beneath the east wing. A mixing room and mold shop extended toward the quarry. 7 flues rose through separate walls, though the mansion displayed only 5 chimneys from outside. "Where are the other 2?" Nora asked. "Hidden when the family closed the works." On the 7th morning, Cyrus arrived in a polished carriage. He wore mourning black so new that it still held its tailor's creases. His wife, Lenora, remained inside, pressing a scented handkerchief to her nose, as if the Manor's decay might cross the yard and touch her. Cyrus examined the patched roof, the cleared drain, and the thin smoke from the servant's chimney. His smile tightened. "You have made yourself comfortable. I have made one room dry, a distinction without importance. The county will condemn this place." He held out a folded document. It offered Nora $25 to return the deed and release all claims connected to the property. "Yesterday it was worth 3, she said. "I am feeling charitable." "Your charity generally arrives with witnesses and a signature line." Cyrus's expression hardened. "Nathan indulged your habit of speaking above your station. Do not mistake his weakness for the world's permission." Nora folded the offer and returned it. "The answer is no." He glanced toward the repaired servant's window. "Are you alone?" "You arranged for me to be." For one instant his eyes moved to the ground beneath the east wing. Nora saw recognition there. He knew the lower chambers had been entered. "You have 10 days, he said. "After that, the county inspector will order the building cleared. If you are wise, you will take my money before the order leaves you with nothing." His carriage departed, but it left a manila notice nailed to the gate. A complaint filed by Bellamy Brick and Rail described the manor as an imminent danger to neighboring property. The company belonged to Cyrus. Nora carried the notice inside. Solomon read it and swore softly. "Can the county take the land?" she asked. "Not for a fallen roof, but they can forbid anyone to live here once you leave. Cyrus will pay the taxes, claim abandonment, and bury you in legal fees." Nora placed the notice beside her father's tools. 10 days was not enough to repair a manor. It was enough to prove that one section could stand. She began with the eastern chimney. The visible stack leaned 6 inches above the roof line, but the base beneath it was straight. Someone had removed stones from the western side to make the entire structure appear unstable. Nora photographed nothing. She had no camera and no money for one. Instead, she drew every course, measured the lean with her father's plumb line, and asked Ruth Delaney and the wagon driver to witness the missing stones before she touched them. Ruth came reluctantly. "I sell flour. I do not testify about chimneys. You know whether a stone is present or absent." Ruth walked around the base twice. "Those marks are fresh." Together they found the displaced stones beneath nettles at the edge of the yard. Each carried pale dust where a lever had been inserted. The work was sabotage, not age. Word spread. Some townspeople still called Nora reckless, but 2 men who had lost wages when Cyrus closed the old brickyard offered a day's labor for meals. Samuel Reed, a carpenter with a missing thumb, helped brace the east corridor. Amos Weaver cleared debris from the stair. Nora paid them nothing she did not owe. She wrote each hour in a notebook and promised payment only if the property produced income. They accepted because she stated the uncertainty plainly. On the 3rd day of repair, Nora removed a broken interior panel beside the chimney and uncovered a vertical channel lined with star-marked brick. Warm air traveled through it from the drying flame below. The hidden flue did not carry smoke. It carried heat into the manor walls. "A whole house warming system," Samuel said. "More than that." Nora pointed to shallow grooves molded into each brick, the pieces locked together. "Heat cannot push the joints apart." Her father had spent years repairing furnaces whose ordinary bricks expanded until arches split. These bricks were shaped to move without failing. The design could protect factories, kilns, and railroad engine houses. Cyrus Company sold thousands of fire bricks each month. Yet none had this construction. Behind the final panel, Nora found 7 ceramic tiles fixed in a vertical row. Each was glazed a different shade, from cream to deep rust. Their edges bore numbers, but not words. The 4th tile had been deliberately smashed. A triangular fragment remained in the mortar. Solomon stared when she showed it to him. Ada's test colors. Who was Ada? Ada Bellamy, Nathan's great-aunt. The family called her unstable because she worked beside men and kept her own accounts. She developed the star brick. Her brother put his name on every sale. What became of her? She disappeared after the fire. That evening, Nora used a sliver of the broken tile to scrape the pale dust from the warm wall. The color beneath the glaze matched exactly. The tiles were not decoration. They were samples, each recording a different mixture of local clay and mineral temper. If she could understand the order, the wall itself might contain Ada's missing formula. Before Nora could compare them, hoofbeats sounded in the yard. A deputy stepped through the damaged front door with County Inspector Horace Venn. Venn was a narrow man whose black coat seemed tailored to make him resemble a closed umbrella. He carried Cyrus' complaint in one hand and a brass-tipped cane in the other. Mrs. Bellamy, I have been told laborers are entering an unsafe structure. 2 men are repairing a supported corridor. You may inspect it. Venn tested every brace and measured the chimney lean. He seemed disappointed when the wall remained firm beneath his cane. Then he entered the parlor and saw the bullet holes. Fire damage, he said. Nora placed the flattened rifle slug in his palm. She had dug it from the plaster that morning. Fire does not leave lead. The deputy examined the broken window and wrote something in his book. Ven's tone changed. I can grant 30 days for emergency stabilization of the west and east service rooms. The upper floors remain closed. No public gathering, no industrial fire, and no sleeping beneath the damaged roof. It was not victory, but it stopped Cyrus from forcing her out immediately. As Venn left, he paused beside the exposed warming channel. Bellamy Brick and Rail has offered to remove this hazard at no cost. Mr. Bellamy offered to purchase it before you arrived. The inspector looked at her for a long moment. Then I suggest you discover why. Nora spent the next week earning money where she could. Ruth introduced her to the baker, whose oven lost heat through a cracked arch. Nora rebuilt the damaged section with 6-star bricks Solomon allowed her to take from a collapsed lower partition. The oven reached baking temperature using 1/3 less coal. The baker paid her $4 and sent bread to the manor each evening. A foundry foreman asked her to inspect a furnace wall. A school trustee hired Samuel to repair benches after seeing the braces he had built under her direction. Respect did not arrive as applause. It appeared as work at the manor. The clue chain deepened. The 7 colored tiles corresponded to 7 old clay pits shown on a faded county map Ruth found in the store's storage room. 6 pits were marked exhausted. The 7th lay beneath the wooded northern ridge included in Nora's deed. No quarry appeared there now, only a depression hidden by pines. Nora, Solomon, and Amos followed the old wagon path to the ridge. Near its crest they found the place from which the first rifle had been fired. Boot marks remained beneath a cedar, along with a brass cartridge case. Below it stood a wall of exposed red shale. Nora broke a sample and found a cream-colored core that matched the pale star bricks. The 7th clay bed had never been exhausted. It had been concealed. Amos discovered an iron rail protruding from the earth. They cleared leaves and exposed the roof of a collapsed quarry entrance. Fresh tool marks showed that someone had tried to open it from the outside. A red thread clung to one jagged edge, the same color worn on the coats of Cyrus Company guards. Nora returned to the manor before dark and found the front door open. The servants' room had been searched. Her trunk lay overturned. Nathan's letters scattered across the floor. Nothing of obvious value was missing. Solomon's memory map, however, had vanished. On the hearth sat a new brick stamped Bellamy, No. 1. A crack split it from face to core. Beneath it, someone had written in coal, "The dead formula killed your husband." Nora carried the brick downstairs. Its outer dimensions matched the star bricks, but its clay was coarse and porous. Cyrus' factory had copied the shape without understanding the material or firing process. She recognized the stamp. The same mark had appeared in the newspaper account of the furnace collapse that killed Nathan and 4 other men. For 3 months, Nora had been told Nathan's death was an unavoidable industrial accident. Now a threat placed inside her home suggested a different truth. Someone knew those bricks were defective before the furnace failed. Solomon turned the cracked sample in his hands. Nathan came here because he suspected Cyrus was mixing river shale into the company clay. It saved nearly $2 per 1,000 bricks. Did he have proof? He said he had invoices and test pieces. He planned to meet a state safety examiner the week he died. Where are they? If I knew, I would have put them in your hands. Nora looked at the 7-pointed mark on the old wall. Ada's formula could make her property valuable. Evidence about the failed bricks could make it dangerous. Cyrus returned the following morning without his wife. This time he offered $500. Enough for a respectable widow to begin elsewhere, he said. Your price has increased 20,000% in 11 days. Your arithmetic is tiresome. Your fear is expensive. He stepped close enough for her to smell tobacco on his coat. Nathan died because he believed skill made him untouchable. Do not inherit his mistake. Did your bricks kill him? For the first time, Cyrus' composure broke. Not much tightening at the mouth, a flicker toward the doorway, but Nora saw it. You have no understanding of industry, he said. Then, why are you paying $500 for my ignorance? Cyrus left the money on the table and walked out. Nora did not touch it. Ruth and Samuel had heard the exchange from the adjoining room. His offer and warning now had witnesses. That afternoon they opened the lower mold shop. The door had rusted onto its hinges, so Nora removed the frame one joint at a time. Inside stood racks of wooden molds, clay presses, and firing trays protected by the dry heat of the wall channels. At the back, beneath a canvas hardened with age, they found a small arch built from 7 layers of differently colored brick. Nora measured each joint and compared it with the ceramic tiles. The missing 4th color occupied the center layer, where heat would have been greatest, when she lit a controlled test fire beneath the arch. The outer bricks warmed gradually while the crown remained stable. Her father's old furnace tables helped her estimate the temperature, but the test stopped before reaching industrial heat. The 4th mixture was essential. Without it, the arch could not be trusted. Inside the base of the test structure, Solomon found a stoneware cylinder sealed with fired clay. Nora opened it carefully. It held no formula. Instead, it contained a folded sheet signed by 12 workers in 1836. The statement declared that Ada Bellamy had designed the interlocking star brick and supervised every successful test. It also accused her brother Walter of ordering cheaper clay after signing a railroad contract. When Ada refused to approve the substitution, he locked the records in the lower works and dismissed the men who supported her. The final line was written in a different hand. If the patent office copy is lost, the furnace itself remains my witness. The signature beneath it read Ada C. Bellamy. Nora had found testimony, but not enough to prove ownership of a process or expose Cyrus Elias's recent fraud. The witnesses were likely dead. The design could be dismissed as an abandoned experiment. Yet the phrase about the furnace changed the question. Ada had not hidden her work in a book that damp or flame could destroy. She had built her evidence into the structure. The Manor was not concealing a document. It was the document. 2 days later, a furnace at Millstone Ironworks began shedding bricks into its firebox. The failure did not come without warning. Workers had complained for weeks that the new lining clicked as it heated and leaked white dust through the joints. Cyrus Company had supplied the material. The foreman silenced the complaints because Bellamy Brick and Rail also held the ironworks debt. At noon, Ruth's younger brother Caleb ran the 6 miles to the Manor. His face was gray with exhaustion. The east wall is bowing. 20 men are still inside, and Mr. Bellamy says shutting the furnace will ruin the poor. Nora understood the choice before he finished. A sudden shutdown could harden tons of iron inside the equipment and bankrupt the works. Continuing could collapse the wall onto the casting floor. She took her hammer, plumb line, leather gloves, and the 6 remaining star bricks from the lower partition. Solomon blocked the wagon. Those pieces are part of Ada's original work, he said, once they enter that furnace. We may never recover them. If we keep them here while men die, then we have learned nothing from her. At the ironworks, heat struck Nora before she crossed the yard. The eastern furnace wall had swollen outward by nearly 2 inches. Fine cracks formed a ladder from the firebox to the upper platform. Cyrus stood beside the foreman, insisting the shift continue. Remove this woman, he ordered. The workers did not move. Nora placed her plumb line against the wall. The weighted cord touched at the base and hung clear by more than the width of her thumb at shoulder height. Clear the east platform, she said. Reduce the draft by half, keep the metal moving, but stop feeding fuel. Cyrus seized her arm. You do not command my works. Caleb stepped between them. She is the only person here who has tested the old bricks. The foreman looked at the widening crack and chose survival over obedience. Bells sounded across the floor. Men pulled the draft levers and moved behind the west barrier. Nora directed Caleb and 2 masons to remove a cool outer section near the failing arch. The Bellamy No. 1 bricks crumbled under their chisels. Several were black only on the surface. Their centers had never been fully fired. Nora fitted Ada's interlocking bricks into the opening. Using a dry clay mixture based on the first 3 tiles, the repair was temporary, but it transferred weight away from the broken crown. For 4 hours, the crew reduced the furnace heat in controlled stages. The wall groaned, shifted, and held when the final iron ran safely into its molds. The men stood in exhausted silence. No one cheered. They looked at the heap of failed bricks on the floor, then at Cyrus. Nora selected 3 damaged samples in view of the foreman, Caleb and the deputy who had been summoned during the crisis. Each witness marked the pieces with a metal punch. One went to the county office, one to Inspector Venn, and one into Ruth S. store safe. Cyrus could no longer make every defective brick disappear. The cost reached Nora before sunset. The 6 old star bricks remained inside the furnace, blackened and inaccessible. She had spent evidence that could not be replaced. More importantly, the entire county now knew the lower works at Bellamy Manor contained surviving material. Cyrus no longer needed a rider on the ridge to tell him whether the chimney had awakened. That night, Solomon handed Nora a brass watch that had belonged to Nathan. He left it with me the morning before the collapse, he said. I should have given it to you sooner. Nora's grief sharpened into anger. Why did you wait? Because Nathan asked me to place it in your hands only after you chose the workers over the formula. He had no right to test me from the grave. No, he did not. Solomon accepted her anger without defense. Nora nearly refused the watch, but a pattern of tiny scratches around its inner case caught her eye. 7 groups surrounded the Maker S mark. Their lengths matched the 7 tile numbers, except the 4th group was longer than the rest. Nathan had not known the formula, but he had measured something inside the kiln. At first light, Nora returned to the test arch. The scratches did not represent time. They represented depth. She inserted a thin wire into a small hole behind each colored layer. The first 3 channels stopped at the lengths Nathan had marked. The 4th continued nearly twice as far. Behind the broken central tile lay a narrow cavity. Nora removed the surrounding mortar and drew out a fired clay bar the length of her forearm. Bands of 7 colors circled it. The 4th band was not missing. Ada had placed the complete sequence, where only someone who measured the wall rather than merely breaking it would find it. The bar gave proportions through volume. Each band's length corresponded to a part of the mixture: local fireclay, ground-fired brick, river sand, powdered feldspar, and a small amount of iron-free kaolin from the northern bed. The final 2 bands recorded water and firing stages. Nora could read it because her father had taught her to measure mortar recipes with marked rods when scales were unavailable on remote jobs. Nathan had found the cavity but had left it sealed. He knew Nora possessed the skill to interpret it, and perhaps he feared Cyrus would force the meaning from him. The discovery brought no immediate wealth. Nora still needed clay tests, controlled firings, and an independent engineer willing to risk Cyrus's anger. She also needed legal proof that the northern bed belonged to the manor rather than to Bellamy Brick and Rail. Ruth found the first piece in a county tax book from 1840. The manor's assessment included dwelling, kiln works, and northern white clay reserve. A later entry had crossed out the reserve and assigned it to the Bellamy Company. But the alteration used ink manufactured decades after the original hand. The county clerk allowed Nora to copy the page while he retained the book. The second piece came from Samuel. While replacing a rotten sill in the old estate office, he found a painted boundary number on the stone beneath it. Parcel 7, the mark aligned with the northern ridge on Nora's deed. The third piece remained underground. Solomon remembered that Ada stored final property records in the cooling vault, a chamber beyond the main kiln. Its iron door had fused shut during the old fire. Nora believed the wall channels could heat the frame enough to expand it, then release it as it cooled. Doing so required relighting the central furnace. Inspector Venn's order expressly forbade an industrial fire. Nora petitioned for a supervised test. Cyrus opposed it through 3 attorneys, claiming the works belonged to his company, even though the deed described every structure on the property. The county scheduled a hearing for the following week. Before it occurred, a sheriff arrived with a notice of unpaid taxes dating back 18 years. The amount was $940. Nora had never seen that much money. The attached affidavit claimed the debt transferred with the land and authorized auction if it remained unpaid for 30 days. Cyrus had signed as the creditor who advanced the taxes. Ruth examined the receipts. If he paid these taxes, why did the county still mark the property delinquent? Because one of the records is false, Nora said. Perhaps both. The sheriff could not decide that at the gate. He sealed the lower works until the court reviewed the claim. Nora was allowed to remain in the servants' wing, but she could not remove bricks, clay, machinery, or records. That evening, someone cut the line to the manor well. An hour later, the stable caught fire. Nora, Samuel, Amos, and Solomon formed a bucket line from the kitchen cistern. The stable was too far gone to save, but the wind pushed sparks toward the east roof. Nora climbed onto the service wing with wet blankets while Samuel soaked the shingles below her. They stopped the flames at the gutter. In the confusion, the sealed door to the lower works was broken open. The intruders did not steal the clay bar or witness statement. They opened all 7 furnace drafts, packed the central grate with coal, and set it alight, with the upper channels still blocked. Pressure drove smoke into the walls. Mortar burst from the parlor fireplace. The hidden warming system became a trap. "Everyone out!" Nora shouted. A deep concussion shook the east wing. Part of the dining room ceiling collapsed. Solomon disappeared in the dust. Nora tied a wet cloth over her mouth and followed the sound of his iron rod. Striking stone, she found him pinned beneath a timber beside the speaking tube. Samuel helped lift it. Solomon's shoulder was broken, and blood ran from his scalp, but he remained conscious. "The main kiln," he gasped. "If the crown goes, the cooling vault goes with it." Nora could not reach the lower controls through the smoke. She ran outside and climbed the scaffold beside the leaning chimney. 7 draft channels converged beneath its cap. Her earlier drawings showed which stones corresponded to each flue. She broke the mortar around the first vent and pulled its stone free. Smoke exploded into the night. She opened the second. Then the 5th. The pressure eased, but the central wall continued to tremble. The 4th vent had been hidden beneath a decorative capstone. Nathan's watch marks told her it was twice as deep as the others. Nora drove her chisel through the seam and leaned against the stone with all her weight. The scaffold shifted. Below, Cyrus stood at the edge of the yard with 2 company guards. Firelight moved across his face. He had arrived too quickly for a man who knew nothing about the blaze. "Come down," he called. "The building is lost." Nora struck the seam again. "The court has sealed those works," Cyrus shouted. "Anything you do now destroys your own claim." The capstone loosened. Nora pushed until it fell inward, revealing the deepest flue. A column of black smoke surged upward. The trembling stopped. The kiln crown held, but the cooling vault did not. When the fire was finally controlled near dawn, its outer wall had cracked from floor to ceiling. The iron door hung twisted in its frame. Water from the bucket line flooded the lower passage. Test molds, wooden patterns, and 3 racks of Ada S original bricks lay broken beneath fallen masonry. Nora stood in the wreckage with burned hands and soot embedded in her skin. Cyrus's sabotage had achieved what 40 years of weather could not. It had destroyed the orderly structure she needed to demonstrate the process. Inspector Venn arrived with the sheriff. Cyrus demanded Nora's arrest for violating the seal and lighting an unauthorized furnace. Samuel, Amos, Ruth, Caleb, and 6 iron workers testified that they saw the stable burning before the lower chimney ignited. The broken seal had been cut from the outside. Cyrus' guards claimed they arrived with him only after seeing smoke. Venn walked beneath the open vents and studied the pry marks. "Mrs. Bellamy saved the east wing," he told the sheriff. "Had she obeyed the seal and done nothing, the chimney would have fallen across the servants' rooms." The sheriff did not arrest her, but the tax claim remained. The court hearing was moved forward to Monday. Nora had 4 days, a damaged kiln, and no complete set of test bricks. Solomon lay in Ruth's spare room under the care of the town doctor. When Nora visited, he asked about the cooling vault. "Broken," she said. "The records may be buried or burned." Uda never trusted paper near fire. "I know about the ceramic bar, not the bar, the vault floor." He described a pattern she had seen but mistaken for drainage grooves, a spiral of different bricks laid across the cooling chamber. Ada had called it the witness floor. Each ring had been fired from a distinct clay blend. Temperatures dropped from the center outward. so every mixture endured a different degree of heat during each firing. The floor preserved decades of results. Nora returned to the cracked vault. Water and soot covered the spiral, but most of it remained intact beneath the fallen door. At the center stood a square pedestal that had been hidden when the iron frame shifted. Its top bore the seven-pointed star. She cleaned the pedestal and saw shallow letters fired into the surface. Heat reveals what ink conceals. The sabotage had heated the chamber more fiercely than any fire since 1837. On the spiral floor, lines of cobalt glaze had appeared between the rings. They formed words, figures, and a rough survey. Ada had painted them with a heat-reactive mixture, then covered them beneath pale slip. Only sustained high temperature made the writing visible. Nora copied every mark before the floor cooled. The first section recorded the complete brick formula and firing stages. It matched the ceramic bar. The second identified the Northern White Clay Reserve and placed all mineral rights within Parcel 7. The third listed the names and wage shares of 32 workers. 10% of future profits was to support injured laborers and the families of men killed in the works. At the outer ring, Ada had written an accusation. Walter Bellamy knowingly substituted river shale to complete a railroad order. The weak bricks caused the 1837 kiln fire. He locked the east doors to prevent workers from carrying out records that proved the substitution. 3 men died. Ada survived long enough to fire her testimony into the cooling floor, then left Ohio under another name after Walter threatened to confine her. Her final message did not ask the finder to preserve the Bellamy fortune. It asked the owner of the manor to reopen the works only if the original safety rules and workers' shares were restored. The floor revealed the legacy, but a message written in brick could still be called a fabrication. Nora needed provenance. Under the cracked pedestal, she found a stoneware box sealed with Ada S. star. Inside, wrapped in oiled wool and protected from water, lay the original 1835 patent drawings, a receipt from the United States Patent Office, and 2 notarized copies of the application. The official model and file had been lost when the Patent Office burned in Washington in 1836. Ada's family copies had survived because she stored them in fired clay. There was also a later deed, witnessed and recorded in 1837, transferring the manor, kiln works, and Parcel 7 from Ada's father to Ada herself. A second instrument conveyed them to a trust for the benefit of any descendant or lawful spouse who restored production under Ada's safety covenant. Nathan had been a qualifying descendant. Nora, as his widow and the recorded owner named on the new deed, could petition to succeed him, but the court still had to recognize the chain. The final papers concerned the present. Nathan had gathered purchase orders, clay invoices, and internal test reports from Cyrus Factory. The reports showed that Bellamy No. 1 bricks failed at temperatures far below the company's advertised limit. Cyrus had signed an order to continue shipment rather than lose the ironworks contract. Nathan S. letter to the state examiner named the danger. He had left the packet with Solomon, who hid it in the vault on the morning Nathan died. Nathan S. death had not been planned in a dark room. It was worse in a more ordinary way. Cyrus knew a furnace might fail, valued his contract above the workers inside it, and silenced the man who tried to stop him. Nora sat on the wet brick floor with Nathan S.'s last unsigned draft in her hands. It ended midway through a sentence. She had spent months imagining words he might have said before death. Now she understood that his last clear choice had been in action. He placed the truth where Cyrus could not buy it, then trusted her to finish what he could not. She allowed herself 1 minute to weep. Then she carried the documents upstairs and began building the case. Ruth placed the originals in the iron store safe. The county clerk compared Ada S. deed with the 1837 registry volume and found matching page numbers, witness names, and seal impressions. A surveyor named Thomas Keene retraced Parcel 7 using boundary stones Nora and Samuel had uncovered. His line placed the concealed clay bed entirely inside the manor property. Dr. Mercer identified Solomon S. injuries and confirmed the stable fire began before the kiln blaze. Inspector Venn documented the cut seal, open drafts, and fresh tool marks. The strongest technical evidence came from the ironworks. Under Venn S. supervision, 2 independent furnace masons removed Nora S. 6-star bricks after the cooled wall was dismantled. The pieces had endured the emergency without cracking. Beside them, the Bellamy No. 1 bricks had split, glazed unevenly, and shed their cores. Every piece received a number. Every transfer had a witness. Nora refused to let the truth depend on a single dramatic object Cyrus could dismiss or steal. On the morning of the hearing, the Millstone courthouse overflowed. Factory workers stood beside farmers. Merchants, widows, and men from Cyrus Railroad office. Cyrus arrived with 3 attorneys and sat behind a table stacked with papers. Nora had one local solicitor, Ruth S. cousin Benjamin Delaney, who warned her that sympathy would not establish title. "Good," Nora said. "We brought more than sympathy." Cyrus' attorneys began with the tax debt. They produced receipts showing Bellamy Brick and Rail had paid assessments on the manor for 18 years. The county treasurer examined them and found that several receipt numbers belonged to different properties. Others carried the signature of a clerk who had died before the stated dates. Benjamin introduced the original assessment books. Until 3 years earlier, the manor taxes had been paid from Nathan's partnership share. Cyrus then redirected those payments to his company while leaving the manor entry unpaid. He created the delinquency he now claimed to have rescued. The judge struck the debt affidavit and referred the false receipts to the county prosecutor. Next came ownership. Cyrus argued that the kiln works were separate industrial property mistakenly included in the Widow S. deed. Nora S. recorded description, however, named the dwelling. East Furnace House, warming channels, quarry road, and all mineral reserves within Parcel 7. Cyrus had signed the instrument. His own attorney had prepared it. My client believed those structures destroyed. One lawyer said, "A poor belief does not erase a boundary," the judge replied. Thomas Keene presented his survey. The county clerk confirmed Ada S. 1837 deed. Benjamin explained the trust covenant without claiming it automatically settled every future royalty. Nora sought recognition as temporary trustee and owner subject to an independent accounting. That careful request mattered. She did not ask the court to hand her a fortune based on a family story. She asked it to preserve the property while the documents were reviewed. Cyrus then attacked Ada S. authorship. He called the witness floor a recent invention made by a desperate widow. Inspector Venn described the layers of 19th century soot above the glaze, and the way the letters emerged only after the sabotage fire. 2 ceramicists testified that the pigments and bricks matched materials used before the Civil War. Solomon, his shoulder-bound, identified the cooling room and named men whose signatures appeared in the 1836 statement. "You expect this court to trust a trespasser who lived under my family's house?" Cyrus asked him. Solomon looked toward Nora. "I expect the court to trust records. Men are weaker." Finally, Cyrus took the stand to defend his company's bricks. His flaw was the same one. Nora had seen at Nathan's coffin. He believed contempt sounded like authority. He declared that no white fireclay existed beneath the northern ridge, that no successful star brick had ever been produced there, and that the pieces recovered from the ironworks must have come from his modern factory. Benjamin placed one of the recovered bricks before him. "Then this is your product?" "Certainly." "Made from your company clay?" "Yes." "Using your company formula?" "Of course." Benjamin turned the brick over. The 7-pointed stamp was visible beneath the soot. He produced Cyrus's current molds. Seized under a county evidence order after the ironworks failure, they carried a 6-pointed imitation because one point had repeatedly broken during pressing. Company invoices dated the mold change to 1874. The brick before Cyrus had been removed from an 1837 wall. Its clay matched Parcel 7. By claiming it as his own modern product, Cyrus connected his company to the very process he said had never existed. The room went still. Benjamin then introduced Cyrus' signed test reports. "Did you also approve shipment of Bellamy? No one after these failures?" Cyrus looked toward his attorneys. But no answer could repair the contradiction. Caleb and the ironworks foreman testified that Cyrus ordered production to continue while the furnace wall bowed. The deputy presented the marked failed samples. Ruth repeated the $500 offer and Nathan S. warning. Samuel identified one of Cyrus' guards as the man he saw near the stable before the fire. The guard broke under questioning. Cyrus had withheld his pay and left him without counsel. He admitted that he and another man were ordered to frighten Nora, search the manor, open the furnace drafts, and burn the stable so the lower works would appear to have ignited accidentally. Cyrus had promised that the old chimney would collapse and destroy whatever remained below. By evening, the court dissolved every claim against Nora's occupancy, recognized her recorded ownership, and appointed her provisional trustee under Ada's covenant, pending a full probate review. Cyrus was arrested on charges involving fraud, arson conspiracy, evidence destruction, and reckless endangerment. Bellamy Brick and Rail entered receivership. the ironworks contract was canceled. A later civil judgment required the company's remaining assets to compensate the families of Nathan and the 4 men killed beside him. Nora did not leave the courthouse wealthy. She left with a damaged manor, a protected clay reserve, a legal duty to workers she had never met, and permission to prove that Ada's process could live again. That was enough. The first winter was devoted to survival, not grandeur. Nora closed the ruined upper floors and roofed only the servants' wing, lower workshop, and west corridor. Insurance money from the arson judgment did not arrive for months. She earned wages repairing ovens and furnace arches while Samuel supervised carpentry. Ruth kept every account. Amos and Caleb cleared the quarry entrance by hand. Solomon, unable to lift with his injured shoulder, trained younger workers to tend drafts by color and sound. The first new kiln firing took place the following spring under Inspector Ven's supervision. Nora mixed only a small batch. The 4th clay band proved difficult. Too much kaolin made the brick brittle, while too little allowed the core to soften. 3 firings failed. Nora recorded each loss instead of hiding it. On the 4th attempt, the interlocking bricks survived 30 hours of increasing heat and cooled without a single split joint. A railroad engineer ordered enough to line 1 engine house furnace. Payment from that contract funded a permanent roof over the lower works. A larger order followed only after 6 months of testing. Nora refused an investor who demanded exclusive control and lower worker shares. She licensed the star brick design to 2 distant manufacturers on the condition that each submit samples for independent testing and contribute to Ada's trust. Bellamy Manor never returned to its former luxury. Nora did not waste money rebuilding decorative towers while workers lacked safe equipment. She restored the ground floor as an office, dining hall, and training room. The scorched parlor became a small school where apprentices studied figures, materials, and furnace safety before entering the works. Women were admitted alongside men. Widows from the 1877 collapse received the first paid positions in inspection and record keeping. Ruth became treasurer of the Workers' Trust. Samuel opened a carpentry shop in the repaired carriage house. Amos managed the clay pit without allowing the ridge to be stripped bare. Caleb trained as a furnace mason. Solomon's name appeared beneath Ada's on the safety manual because preserving knowledge. Nora believed was also a form of invention. Inspector Venn remained cautious. He closed the kiln twice for repairs and refused to soften his reports merely because he admired Nora's work. She valued him more for that. Trust built on indulgence would have repeated the Bellamy family's oldest failure. 2 years after the deed crossed Nathan's coffin, Nora stood in the parlor beside the wall that had once answered her touch. The bullet holes had been repaired but not concealed. Small brass rings marked their places as a reminder that the manor's new life began under threat. The sealed fireplace had become a glass-fronted section of the warming channel, allowing visitors to see the interlocking star bricks carrying heat without smoke. A new apprentice named Elsie Hartwell pressed her palm to the warm wall. "Mrs. Bellamy, is it true someone was trapped behind here?" "No," Nora said. The sound traveled through an iron tube from the kiln below. "Were you frightened?" "Very." The girl seemed surprised. "But you stayed." Nora looked through the restored window toward the northern ridge. The clay pit was small against the woodland, managed carefully enough that young trees still covered most of the slope. Beyond it stood 3 new cottages built by the Workers' Trust for injured laborers and their families. Nathan's name was carved above the clinic door, not because he had been a Bellamy, but because he tried to stop a dangerous furnace when silence would have protected him. Staying was not the brave part, Nora said. Listening was. At sunset, the shift bell rang below. It was followed by 3 measured blows on the old speaking pipe, the signal that the kiln doors were secure. Nora lifted her father's hammer and answered twice against the brass plate. Across the fields, the tallest chimney released a clean blue ribbon into the evening air. Once that smoke had warned Cyrus that a buried secret was waking. Now it meant the workers had finished safely. The schoolroom was warm, and every name erased from the old Bellamy records had been written back into the light.